how did you become involved in the Transparency Task Force?
I invited Andy Agathangelo to come and meet Chris Sear because Chris was trying to evaluate a business which was going to be involved in the auto-enrolment business. Chris was the chief executive of Cass Bank in London at the time. Andy came over, we had a meeting which was Andy, Chris and myself. And the topic shifted to transparency, and by the end of the hour or so that we spent talking there, we had agreed to, ask Andy, well, we had asked Andy to go off and investigate whether there was a desire for something along the lines of Friends of Auto Enrolment or the Association of Member-Nominated Trustees, whether there was interest in doing something collectively in the area of transparency. And we agreed to fund a project from Andy to see if there was and what form it should have and what it should seek to do.
The Investment Association recently put out a press release saying that opacity in asset management is a myth. What do you say to that?
I wrote an article for IPE on that paper. It's a very interesting piece of work that they published. They described hidden costs as being the Loch Ness Monster. The paper came to the conclusion that there were no hidden charges and that fund managers add value, and isn't it all fantastic? This runs contrary to almost everything I have ever seen. They failed to answer. I raised a number of questions in that article with Investment and Pensions Europe. They have published at least 2 responses that I'm aware of. None of them address any of the questions that I asked. And I've seen more recent stuff, which is in the traditional vein on very similar data sets. As I said, I found the paper offensive. It was incredible. If they want to convince people that what they've done is a piece of work which is robust and rigorous, they should publish it all, the data and everything else. And most importantly, Helena Morrissey, who is chair of the Investment Association, has recently been saying to the press that they would like to put all that behind them.
Which is encouraging, isn't it?
If you believe them. I mean, they have a group working as an advisory board, but it's an advisory board which is only going to consider the output of their own working parties.
What do you make of the claim by Tom Tugendhat MP, of course a leading light in the task force? He says that the asset management fees are effectively a stealth tax on businesses and individuals.
You have to think about both regulation and taxation together here. My area and most of the Transparency Task Force current focus is on pensions. And pensions, of course, benefit from tax subsidies in the form of tax deferment. So we have the 25% tax-free lump sum, and we generally typically have lower rates of income taxes applicable in retirement to those when we were working. So the tax deferral is also a form of tax subsidy to the individual. It's not very effective. In fact, it's grossly ineffective. It doesn't increase aggregate savings. What it does is affect where people will save. The idea of tax incentives for savings is very questionable almost everywhere. And we have a highly fragmented regulatory system around pensions, with the FCA, the pensions regulator, the DWP, and old Uncle Tom Cobley involved. Notably, in recent times, the Treasury, with such things as freedom and choice. Yes, a great deal of what's being caught by the fund management industry is in fact tax subsidy that rightly belonged with the pension saver. The Treasury looks upon the fund management industry as their favoured wunderkind. because it's extremely profitable. And I mean, margins are 30-40% in the fund management business. And they pay a great deal in taxes to the Treasury. They also serve as a recapture of part of the subsidy that goes to us as pension savers. Those fees being paid to fund managers are partly a capture of tax subsidy. So the Treasury is very happy to see the fund management industry continuing.
Do you have any evidence of that?
Of them
being, in a sense, complicit in this form of, I suppose, indirect taxation?
There are numerous cases where the Treasury has declined to introduce further taxes on the fund management industry. The classic illustration of this actually is the treatment of the private equity world, with preferential rates for capital gains and so on. You don't need to go any further than that. There you're talking about billions.
You implied that you don't have much faith in the Investment Association's ability to reform the industry from within, if you like. Do you see transparency coming to asset management, or at least greater transparency coming to asset management in the next few years?
Yes, I do. I think we will mark the absolute nadir of the Investment Association's behaviour, either by the voluntary redundancy of Daniel Godfrey last year, which I think was last October, or perhaps this report that was just published this summer. They, I think, have realised, at least some of them have, just how intense the opposition is becoming. We also have a concerted effort by the local government pension scheme to introduce disclosure standards and a template designed by Chris Sear, who set up the Transparency Task Force. I think we've seen the low point. Will we see recalcitrant members of the IA? Yes. I've absolutely no doubt about that. The extent of these things is sad. But more and more it's becoming evident the way in which costs and fees have been hidden, misdescribed, and generally gone wrong. We now have papers coming out from the Bank for International Settlements showing that fund management groups have systematically exploited customers in ways that I didn't think were even legal.
With Regis Media's video subscription service, you'll receive expert views on investing from around the world. Videos come fully branded to your firm and are delivered within 2 weeks of signing up. Find out more by visiting regismedia.com.